Hi guys, so over the last year since the SNP and Greens gained seats at the expense of the Labour Party and Lib Dems, and which saw the Tory vote drop, the First Minister Nicola Sturgeon has been under pressure from within her party and the greater pro-independence movement to deliver on the mandate that she was given and call a second referendum. Some in Scotland had suggested that she never really wanted independence but was only using it as a political tool to stay in power. But that was debunked on Tuesday when the First Minister got the ball rolling by sending a request for a legal ruling on a referendum to the UK Supreme Court. The response from pro-union parties was pretty much the same. There's a cost of living crisis. There are NHS waiting lists to be reduced. There are issues with education that all need the attention of the Scottish Government. Now is not the time for a referendum. The response from journalists was to say that this constitutional issue has already been resolved. Here the First Minister answers Kay Burley's questions on why she called a second referendum.
Well, he said in 2014, as we all know, that this was a once-in-a-generation referendum. I wonder what the clear mandate is that you're talking about. I was looking in the Daily Record saying that there have been 23 polls in the last year, and yes has led in only 3 of them.
Well, let me take head on this once-in-a-generation point. In 2014, at the last referendum, now almost a decade ago, those of us arguing for independence, yes, said to people, make sure you don't lose this opportunity, we might never get the chance again. But no politician can stand in the way of democracy. Democracy is not a single fixed moment in time. People in a democracy have the right to change their minds.
They have the right to change their minds, but also I think it's important to include the fact that there is a whole generation of young people who didn't get a chance to vote in 2014. And there's also a generation of young people who didn't get a chance to vote in 2016. So what I'm talking about here is a lot of young people are pro-independence, but they were too young to vote in 2014. And there are a lot of young people who are pro-European and didn't get a chance to vote in 2016. Now, of course, it is important to remember that Scotland voted to remain in the European Union, even though it was told back in 2014 that if it voted for independence, it would be voting to be out of the European Union.
If circumstances change, and nobody can argue that circumstances have not changed since 2014. You know, back then, Scotland was told we would lose European Union membership if we voted for independence, and now we're out of the European Union because we didn't become independent. That's happened against our will. We were told the prospect of Boris Johnson ever becoming Prime Minister was ridiculous. That may have been true, but it is nevertheless a reality now. And yet again, we have a Westminster government pulling us in the wrong direction, creating the worst cost of living crisis in the developed world, almost because of Brexit. And Scotland is expected to just say, well, you know, there's nothing we can do about that. So this.
And here's a question I have for maybe Labour MPs. So, members of Parliament for the Labour Party and the Liberal Democrats as well. Do you think Scotland would be better off in a union run by Boris Johnson, or do you think to be better off independent? Because at the moment they have zero influence over Boris Johnson and the Tories, and they're at his whim. If he decides let's break international law, Scotland has to go along with that as well. If they want to act in a way that undermines peace in Northern Ireland, they have to go along with that as well. If they were independent, they could be supporting peace in Northern Ireland. They could be supporting international law.
This is about democratic choice. It's not up to me whether Scotland becomes independent, but it is up to me to fulfil the promise I made to people in Scotland and was elected on, to offer people that choice. And you can quote opinion polls, I can quote opinion polls back at you, but what I'm actually standing on is the outcome of a democratic election. There is a stronger mandate for an independence referendum in the Scottish Parliament than there ever was for a Brexit referendum in the UK Parliament. A majority of MSPs in the Scottish Parliament support a referendum. So if we are a democracy, then that should be respected. And then, of course, it is up to people in Scotland whether they vote for independence or against independence. That is how to resolve issues in any democracy.
And she's correct. The idea that, look, you can look at opinion polls, and opinion polls will change according to the opinion of the people on the day. But the SNP have won a mandate. The Greens have won a mandate. And part of that mandate was delivering on a second referendum. Now, it seems what is going to be possible here, or what's likely, is going that the SNP, the First Minister, has sent this request to the UK Supreme Court. If the UK Supreme Court comes back and says, no, you can't have a second referendum, then there's a possibility that the mandate, so there will be an election, and the SNP will run on the single issue of independence. So if the people of Scotland vote for that, that would be enough. It would not be necessary to have a referendum. So what seems to be happening is the Scottish Government are going down two routes. First route is, let's try with a referendum. If the UK Supreme Court says no, then what we'll do is we'll, at the next general election, we will run on a single issue of independence. And if a majority of Scottish people vote for us, which is likely, then that is enough. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think about all of this. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot.